What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Saturday morning live stream. This is Derek with ReefAutomation. As you can see, I got some new tools to make this really cool. I got a new camera, got a whole new slew of things. So today's a big day. We're going to be talking about calcium reactors. Specifically, we're going to be talking about how to program calcium reactors. I get a lot of people that ask me all the time, how do I program a calcium reactor into the Apex? And I also get people asking me all the time, what's the best calcium reactor? What's the best regulator? What's the best this? And we're going to go over all that today. We also have a special guest with us today, and he owns one of the aquarium engineering ACRs. That is the one that I'm going to be giving away today. It is roughly about $1,700 in value because what you're going to be getting is a CO2 tank, you're going to be getting a regulator, and you're going to be getting the ACR. So it's going to be a 6-inch dual ACR, and it is working pretty well. So whoever gets it is going to have a lot of fun with it. So let's see, we got a bunch of people in the chat already. Thank you, everybody that entered the contest. So, a couple rules of the contest before we start. We need to get 50 people entered. Right now, we got 22 people entered in order to give it away. The winner needs to pay for shipping. So, if you are across the pond, it's going to probably cost you quite a bit to get this thing shipped. So, I just want you to be aware of that beforehand. I have no problem shipping it to Canada. I have no problem shipping it to the UK, but just be aware it's going to be pretty expensive. So right now we got 24 people that have entered the contest. Again, not people in the stream. 50 people have to enter the contest in order for me to give it away. And we'll go over again with John here in a moment, kind of how it works, how he's using it, and so that way whoever wins it knows how to use it, knows how to set it up, because the unit doesn't come with instructions. So you will probably need to know how to use it and work with it. So another thing, let's see, we got Reef Dudes on here, we got Reefing with O, Gary, what's up, everybody? Sleet Stack, the usuals, everyone's in here. So one other thing, the mods here in the channel are going to pay attention to the participants of the contest, and whoever wins here at the end, since it's such a large prize, has to be someone that has participated today, has asked some questions, has been involved with the chat, because I'm not going to give it away just to someone who came in and entered the contest and then left and then came back later. That's just not fair to everybody else. So should be a good stream. Hopefully not too long, but that all depends on our guest today and how much he wants to talk. So, all right. So I'm going to bring John in. Again, this is John Tolbert. He belongs to our Reef automation group, and he owns an ACR. So here we go. What's going on, John?
How's it going, Derek? How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, buddy. So tell us your ACR story before we go into some of the more calcium reactor related questions.
All right. So, in the end of, well, I guess at the end of October of last year, I ordered my calcium reactor, my ACR. I got a pretty good deal on mine. For my 8-inch, I paid around, I don't know, $1,100 for it. So it's not terrible for what they typically go for. But it started by he told me that it'd take about 60 days for it to come in, and they were coming in. It was building very quickly. Um, December, I rolled past December. I figured, it's holidays. Let it go into January. Got through January. Still, there was a whole bunch of promises of saying, hey, it's gonna get shipped out. It never did. And it was kind of a whole bunch of issues with, it's having problems with the shipping and UPS, and the foam not, injectors not working right for the boxes. And then by the end of February, I called them up. I said, enough is enough. Look what's going on here. And I finally got an answer. It's going to get shipped out. So Luckily, it got shipped out when I was in Disney, so the happiest place on earth. I got my I got my reactor. My dad brought it into the house. I had him open up, checked everything out. It was the only thing was inside the box was the reactor. Evidently, there was no controller, there was no regulator, there was nothing with it. It was just the regulator. It was just the reactor and the hosing, and that was it.
Wow.
So I called him up while I was in Disney, and my wife was, she wasn't going to hold me back at this point. So I went off on him on the phone, and
Okay.
eventually I told him I need it by Friday, but when I get back from Disney, and he promised he was there, and you know what? He did follow through with that, and then I got it on that Friday.
That's
So
fantastic.
yeah, from that point on, he did call me on, I think it was on Sunday, to make sure how everything was set up and everything was working properly. So I had a little different experience than what Derek had. Maybe probably because I chewed his ear out while I was in Disney. But yeah, and then it was working great for, I say, about 3 months, and then I started seeing my alkalinity drop inside the tank. Thanks to the Trident, it picked up on it pretty darn quickly. And what ended up happening was the one pinch valve inside of the box, it wore a hole through the tube.
Oh, wow.
If the whole box filled up with water, and it wasn't dosing CO2 anymore, because guess what? It was, that solenoid fried. So I called him up on that Sunday night. I kind of was expecting to get his voicemail and nothing else, and luck, I got it. He actually picked up the phone for me. So
Wow.
he got one shipped out. Yeah, he got one shipped out Monday morning, and I had it by, I think, Thursday, and I had everything set up. Friday he gave me a call and make sure everything was good. So now obviously my experience is a lot different than Derek's. And people are going to have a different experience. Well, no matter what company you ever deal with. So
Well,
but right now it's perfect.
we're not gonna, I'm not gonna go into too much today of my experience. A lot of people that are on the
No, please.
stream know my experience quite vividly. I have went over it multiple times. But unfortunately, the same thing kind of happened to you that's happened to everybody with it, which is just the communication. And
Yep.
you know, again, I'm not going to really go into it, but he knows, the owner of the company knows he's got to work on his communication skills and getting back to his clients, and that's really it. A lot of people are mentioning that the new ones, I guess, come with instructions. I'm
They
sure
do. I
yours
know.
did not, mine did not.
No, I
Um,
actually wrote a set of instructions for Bill after I had my experiences with it,
okay.
and provided him those instructions. And I know someone else inside his group did as well. And we kind of worked together to develop those instructions for it.
Mhm.
So hopefully, people that will be receiving those instructions, will be able to get the most out of them now.
Right. So someone had a question here, do you prefer reactors over dosing? So this is going to be a big discussion of today. And
Yes.
for John, it might be a little different. He's got a big tank. But for the people that have smaller tanks out there, um, let's just start with a 50 gallon. You got a 50-gallon tank, you're not going to be running a calcium reactor. There's just no reason to. No matter what you got in there, dosing is going to be your better bet. Now, of course,
Hmm.
you can get a small calcium reactor for a 50 gallon, but is it worth spending all the money for it? I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, calcium reactors are generally going to be meant for larger systems.
So
And the reason
I
that
would
is, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I would say, even for bigger systems, if you have a high alkalinity draw on the tank and decide has a high absorption rate, that's when you start thinking about switching over to the calcium reactor.
Hmm.
Because I know, like, when I switched to the calcium reactor in my tank, I was up to 230 mils a day in alkalinity,
Wow.
and you can imagine that's, with me using two part, that would get rather expensive. So that's why I
Right.
switched to the calcium reactor, and it's been
So
rock
you
solid
brought up
since.
a good point, and to James' question as well. If you got a 50 gallon and you're dosing 250 milliliters a day, which you won't be, but if you
No.
are, then yeah, maybe it calls for a calcium reactor. But generally, anything below 100 gallons essentially doesn't need one. I have a 100-gallon tank, and the calcium reactor I purchased was too big for it. Now that was the ACR that I have that I'm giving away. Um, Now I didn't
Yeah,
know
I
it
would
was
probably
too big
recommend
for
it
it.
if you probably got the 4-inch version of that reactor for your
Yeah,
tank.
and that's what I started to realize is it was just too big and it was doing too much. Um, so for those that are out there, just know that the ACR that I have has a new controller, has all new parts because I had to replace them all, but it works perfectly fine now, you know. So in the beginning, it was not the case. Let's see. So generally prefer to start with dosing. So is it generally preferred to start with dosing and then switch to add to a calcium reactor? I would say yes.
Yeah,
Generally, I
start
would
with
start with dosing first because dosing is a much easier way to go about it. Once you start to see that you're spending a lot of money on dosing, that's when you start to decide I'm going to do a calcium reactor. I think money comes into the factor really with calcium reactors and time. I'm dosing, and I have to change out the 200 or 2 liter containers roughly every week and a half. It's not a big deal. But if I was having to change those out every couple days, I would be like, yeah, I need a calcium reactor. you know? So, let's see. Some people are asking about some stupid things.
But I saw one of the questions on there. How big is my tank? This tank is 200 gallons. It's
Okay.
a 200-gallon cube, if you will. It's 4 foot long by 3 foot wide by 2 foot high. Custom-made tank.
Okay. Gary, I believe, again, I think the question for you would be your consumption rate. A lot of the people ask, okay, I have a 400-gallon tank. Do I need a calcium reactor? Well, no. If you have a bunch of Xenia in there, I mean,
Mhm.
you're not going to need a calcium reactor. Now, if you're using, if you got tons of clams and you got tons of acros in there, yeah, you're going to need a calcium reactor. It's just going to be too
Mhm.
much consumption. Um, so Anthony had a good question. When do you need to use a secondary chamber? So this is a really heated conversation because, a secondary chamber technically is supposed to help with pH coming out of your calcium reactor to higher or get the pH up so you don't have to worry about low pH.
So I disagree with that.
Unfortunately, yeah, exactly. So unfortunately, it doesn't really work very well. I've had a couple different calcium reactors with secondary chambers, and they're kind of worthless. I mean, they might make your pH maybe point 0.3, point 0.4 higher, but I don't think they're necessary. I think they're a gag gift, I guess is the right word.
Yeah, I know. I tried on mine on my old one. I had my first reactor was built by it was a ProCal unit,
hmm
um, which it had a secondary chamber on it, and I tried it with this without the secondary chamber as well as with,
hmm
and I didn't see much of a difference at all.
Right.
So
That's
it was
generally
very little of anything.
the that's generally the what's the word I'm looking for?
Consensus.
The consensus. There you go. However, there's a rebuttal to that. I have heard of people making large secondary chambers with success. Now, if you have a large one, and what I mean by large is not necessarily wide, but tall. So if you have a 6 foot tall secondary chamber, that will work and it will raise your pH because all the CO2 will have definitely degassed by the time it gets to the bottom of that 6 foot chamber. So
Hmm.
that does work. But these small little nothing secondary chambers, they really don't do anything.
No, they really don't.
So, all right, let me catch up on some of these people. Do you think it would be better to have. So, producer Reef asked, do you think it would be better to have an ALK monitor with a calcium reactor? I'm assuming he means like a Trident or a Alkatronic or something, and I 100% agree it would be very beneficial to have some type of monitor with your calcium reactor. Absolutely. It makes
Yeah,
tuning
you
it
don't
in
have to
so
test
much
it all.
easier.
You don't have to test it all the time. Like if you just do the standard, dose or testing regimen that the Trident does with the
Mhm.
4 testings a day, you're more than fine with that.
Right.
Because it's not you're not gonna have that major increase unless you adjust your bubble rate or your effluent output to an obscene amount.
Right. And Corey just asked a pretty good question. How much does your calcium fluctuate with a calcium reactor? Now, for those that aren't familiar with calcium reactors, they distribute alkalinity and calcium at a balanced rate. So
Mm-hmm.
generally, your calcium is not going to fluctuate. It's going to go with whatever your alkalinity is. So if your alkalinity is fluctuating, your calcium is going to fluctuate. So that's generally how calcium reactors work.
Yep.
So a lot of people have asked what regulator you're using. So what regulator do you use?
So mine is just a standard beer, CO2 regulator
Okay,
with a John Guest fitting on it.
I see. So it didn't break your ACR, for instance?
No, no. The trick to those are, you just make sure you turn it down the output valve all the way down, and then open up the CO2 main valve very slowly, and then open up to about 6 to 8 pounds of pressure outside
Okay.
out of it.
So someone asked how long does the CO2 tank last? Now,
Um,
for
it
me,
depends.
for me, I had a 5 pound tank, and I was very surprised to see that my ACR was definitely causing the CO2 to drop lower than any calcium reactor I've ever had. I don't know if you experienced that with your ACR. Are you noticing your
No, the
CO2 going away as fast?
the first couple days you will notice that because as it's kind of building up pressure within inside the reactor. But after that, my tank came with about 800 pounds, little more than that, and right now it's sitting at 750 pounds over the last 3.5 months. So
Okay.
it's been pretty steady. It's using because it has that recirculation of the CO2 that runs through it, and it kind of monitors based upon that.
So another big question. So this is a big question I have for you, because I struggled with this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So what is your pH in your tank with that ACR?
Right. Currently, right now, and I can even say it. It's currently right now at 8.12,
Wow. And where do you live?
and my lights just turned on at 12:30.
And where do
So
you live?
I live in Pennsylvania,
Okay.
and if anybody knows Pennsylvania right now, it's very humid, and so right now the air conditioner is on.
Okay. So,
So
is there anything in your tank that you do to maintain a higher pH?
uh, not really. I do have um, a refugium that runs on this tank that's on for about I say 18 hours a day. For the light, but and then I have the skimmer plumbed to the outside, so it's pulling fresh air from the outside and it's pumping right into the tank. So
Hmm.
and I have it's a Reef Octopus 250 INT on this system.
Okay. So, for those that aren't out there that are like John, like me, my pH was 7.7, 7.6 with a calcium reactor. I struggled significantly to keep my pH up. I tried a refugium, I tried a Co2 reactor, I tried kalkwasser, I tried everything you can imagine to raise the pH, and the only thing that would work was kalkwasser, at least on my end. Um, Ever since I switched to dosing, my pH is 8.1 almost all the time. So that is my biggest concern with calcium reactors generally is the pH drop. I mean, you get a so I always ask people that have calcium reactors, how are they maintaining such a high pH? And I think a lot of it does have to do with location, and a lot of it does have to do with how much fresh air is coming into your home. Um, if your house has leaks, for instance, in your insulation or your roofing or whatever, you know, I don't know. I just know that for me, I could never get my calcium reactor to give me 8.1 or higher ever. It was always 7.7 or 7.6 or something.
Now during the winter time, it was hitting around between 7.9 to 8.
Okay, that's still not
And
bad.
no,
Yeah.
for the system it works. And I be honest with you, I don't chase my pH at all.
Right. Which I've
So,
kind of started to learn to do.
yeah, it's kind of forget about it.
Let's see. I'm going to look at some of the other questions here. We kind of went over some of that.
But if you
Someone
want,
was,
I can go show over my system real quick if you'd like.
yeah, we're going to do that here. Absolutely. Someone asked, where do you drop your effluent? So that's a
So
good
my
question.
effluent drops into the return chamber,
Okay.
or the chamber right before it. So my pH probe is in the chamber before, and then I drop right into the chamber afterwards.
And Colt had a basic question, which I'll answer real quick, but then it gives me alarms on pH code going crazy. So Colt, take a look at my virtual outlet programming. There's a way that you can program your alarms so that they don't go crazy. You can program them to only go on at certain times of the day, and I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about, but that's all I saw. All right, so another good question. How do you use your Apex to control your ACR? Well, you really don't do anything. You just plug it in. And John's going to show you that.
Yep.
All right, so go ahead.
All right. So this is my 200 cube. It's kind of a side view of it. It's like I said, it's acropore heavy. It's got a lot of nice little kind of areas for the fish to hide, anthias and wrasses and everything else. Kind of comes over the front here, as long as you can see it. And there's the front. So I do have a very a somewhat large clam that I actually had brought in. So one of my buddies is actually an importer, so I can get pretty much anything I'm looking for. He can get it for me.
Nice.
So I'm kind of one of the lucky guys, as well as fish. So right now I do have the what's called the sailfin back there. The Desjardins is he's about 12 years old.
Wow.
So he's old. And I have my purple tang, which is actually introduced after the Desjardins. And then I also had the the yellow tang and also a yellow Scopus tang. They were introduced after him as well, after the purple tang. But yeah, that's kind of overview of the tank.
Nice.
This is my makeshift setup, if you will, for my controllers.
Hey, it's better than most people.
Fancy as Derek.
Hey man,
What's that?
It's way better than most people I see. Some guy sent me a wire nest, and I go, holy crap! And then they're like, I'll pay you to come out. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not flying out to North Carolina to fix your wire management, dude.
But I also do automatic water changes overnight. So it takes this system takes about 4 to 5 gallons out a night, and it adds 4 to 5 gallons back in overnight as well.
So
that way, go ahead.
So a lot of people are asking about the ACR, of course. Now I'm just going to kind of go through it real quick, and John, just interrupt me if I'm wrong. So the ACR is an automatic. It's called an automatic calcium reactor. That's the name of it, ACR. And what that means is you plug it in. There's nothing more to it. Now, I will tell you that you can plug it into your Apex, and you can program it to turn off if your alkalinity gets high. So in terms of programming, that would be the only programming Apex side that you would need, and that is to kill it if the alkalinity gets too high. Other than that, and John's going to show you, it's all done automatically by itself. So you don't have to do anything else. So
all you have to do is really plug in the tubing, and that's primarily it.
Yeah. So go ahead and go ahead and show them the ACR. Show them that yours works and doesn't have problems like mine.
That's the ACR. So the bubbles you see are normal because it is recirculating the CO2 that's sitting on top. So some people may have a pocket of air that sits on top, and that's typically because there's air or is being entered in through the return pump or the feed pump.
Mm-hmm.
Now mine is being fed from a manifold from a return,
which is how mine is also.
Yep. So mine's above at the very top of the stand, so I don't that way it doesn't backfeed into my system.
So for those that were just listening, you do need to have a feed into this unit. So when we say automatic calcium reactor, you still need a feed. You need to feed it from a manifold, or you need to feed it from a small pump, but it has to have a water feed. Okay. So keep going.
So looking at the actual unit itself, you have, if you look at the top lid here,
Mhm.
you have your effluent out. For the new change in the design, this is actually now it has become the purge tubing for
Okay.
the purge output, and then to the right of that is going to be your CO2 input as well as CO2 recirculation.
Right. Which mine, of course, didn't have. But anyway, how does CO2 get connected? So he just kind of showed you how the CO2 gets connected, and for some reason, someone asked, there is no CO2 regulator. There is a CO2 regulator.
There is.
The only difference between what he's doing on an ACR, or actually everyone's doing on an ACR, and what a normal ACR does, is his is consistently sending flow to it. There's no solenoid.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for those that are interested in an ACR, and the one I'm giving away comes with the one that he's showing you, it is constant flow. And the valve box, which he just showed you, the little valve box, cuts the CO2. It has a solenoid built into it. So it cuts the CO2 at the box, not at the regulator. Now, some people have ran their ACR with a solenoid, which you can do, but you're going to have to keep it open all the time. Okay?
Yeah, it's not recommended for that type of design. They end up tending to fail with this type of setup.
I assume if you feed it from a manifold.
Beer regulator.
Yeah, that's the same one, by the way, that I'm giving away with my unit. It's the exact same one that he has right there, which is the one that Bill recommended to me after he said I broke his. But anyway, let's see.
But this is the control module for it.
This is what others called degassing. That's not exactly correct. I don't know how to say your name. I'm sorry, Murtaza. This purge valve that is there is not for degassing. The purge valve on the ACR that Bill provides, I assume, with all the new ones, takes out the excess air inside the ACR, so that way it gets the correct amount of CO2.
See, they do offer a purge valve for it. I believe Bill selling for about $175 for it. It will turn off and on depending upon what your interval is.
Mm-hmm.
But I know with mine, I don't have a purge valve on mine. To be honest with you, I've never had a problem with it ever filling up with excess bubble at the top.
Yeah.
But if you did, you just purge it every so often.
Yeah.
Some people do. But.
Okay, so I have to get to this question. I'm gonna go on a tangent here. Reefing with O said, I'm sorry, Derek, but the ACR doesn't sound any better than normal calcium reactors. The differences don't sound any different than my calcium reactor with carbon doser. Okay. John will also chime in after me.
Yep.
Okay. There is really, honestly, in my opinion, and these are my opinions, no difference between having this and a normal calcium reactor to maintain alkalinity. Reefing with O is absolutely correct. It does exactly the same thing. The difference is this automatically has the ability to send effluent, which you don't need an extra pump for. Okay, so you don't need to get a Versa, you don't need to get a Camor, you don't have to get any pump to run it through the calcium reactor. This does it for you. Okay. Secondary to that, the regulator doesn't need to be turned on and off. The valve box does that for you. So, yes, Reefing with O has a perfect point. Where's the difference? The only difference, and what I found is the only difference, is this is automatic, meaning you plug it in and you don't have to worry about it ever again. You don't have to worry about your effluent flow. You don't have to worry about your CO2 input or your bubble count. You don't have to worry about pushing water through or clogging. This does it all for you, all in one box. Did I get that pretty much set, John?
Yeah. The big thing, especially for me, and the reason why I went with the ACR is because in my job, I do have to travel 75% of my time. So I needed something where I could, if my wife had to get her hand in there and try to, fix something, or my father had to come over, they can easily look at it and go, okay, it's an easy fix.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is something that was able to provide that for me.
Right. Gary had a question that I did want to say. Gary, the prize comes with everything you need except for tubing. I don't have any tubing, so you'll need to get some RO tubing. I
It's
would
good thing that's cheap.
recommend getting color-coded tubing. Um,
Yes.
should be pretty good as long as they get wet. A couple other questions here. So, Reefing with O, I appreciate you definitely asking that because that is a really good question or concern for everyone out there. These units cost $1,500, okay? I'm not going to go over the company and I'm not going to go over my story and all. Everyone that knows me knows what happened. If you buy the ACR, don't expect to get it for 2 or 3 months. That's just what's going to happen. Um, but I don't see the difference, I guess, between a regular calcium reactor and this one, with the exception of the automatic features, like I mentioned. Um,
You know, only thing you don't have to worry about too is, again, you don't have to worry about trying to find your right bubble count. You don't
right.
have to worry about trying to maintain the pH inside of the reactor. Everything's done automatically for you.
I forgot that. So another thing, guys, is that the ACR does not require a pH probe, and therefore does not require a pH, any type of pH monitoring whatsoever. It does it all automatically. So that's another reason. Reefing with O had another great question, which we're going to go over. So John, I want you to actually explain how this works because people are asking,
Yep.
how do you control the effluent rate? How do you get more alkalinity? How do you, the basics of how you get a
Yep.
calcium reactor working?
So you saw kind of the first number kind of changed. So right now I have my setting for it runs 3 seconds of effluent out to the tank, and then 311 seconds off. So that way you have kind of chance to the tank has a chance to recuperate from the amount of effluent that's got put into it. It also helps you, obviously the more effluent that you do put inside a tank, the higher alkalinity and calcium is going to be, and as you know, and then your bond number is going to be what you can adjust that for fine tuning. Right now, my tank, before I was running without a calcium reactor, and when I was down, I was about 230 to 240 milliliters of alkalinity a day. So just to give you an idea of how powerful the effluent is out of this reactor, right now I'm running 3 seconds over 311 off. So
All right,
that's
so
a lot of effluent, or a lot
yes.
of
All right, so I'm going to
alkalinity.
explain this to everybody that's on here because there's a lot of just random questions. So, okay, the top number is when it turns on. And when it turns on, it spits out very high alkalinity. Okay? And what he just said, basically, yours is what, 48 DKH, you said?
Yeah, it was like I tested yesterday. It's about 48.5 DKH out.
Okay, so that's one thing that I have to mention multiple times to people out there. This calcium reactor is really only meant for bigger tanks because of such a high alkalinity that it has. You notice John has a 200-gallon tank with a lot of SPS, and he's only turning it on for 3 seconds. That's it, 3 seconds. Now,
And then 311 seconds off.
right. So
Oh,
how you adjust this is you figure out, okay, I need to turn it on for this long and off for this long to maintain an alkalinity that I need. So that's basically how it works. There's nothing more to it. So you have to
easiest
be
way to do
very
it as well is if you measure the effluent output by measuring the milliliters out.
uh-huh.
That's what I did, and kind of figure out based upon my DKH drop, and did all the math.
Right. Now having a Trident or having some form of a monitor will definitely help you get this thing tuned in faster. Because when I had it, I had my Trident doing a test every hour because this is the other thing I have to mention. I don't know if this happened with John, but it's such a high alkalinity that you need to really monitor your alkalinity for the first day or two with this device because it's so high. I recommend you starting it with 1 second on and maybe 500 off and see if your alkalinity drops. If it starts dropping, then you can either adjust the top number or the bottom number. Generally, I say adjust the bottom number first. I don't know about what you think, John, but
I would say, depending upon your drop, I would say increase the top number first, and then
okay,
use your bottom number to fine tune. So
okay,
right now, like I said, I fine tune off of up to 200 seconds off, and I adjust my top number accordingly.
Okay.
So I use the bottom number as my fine tuning.
So again, if you guys decide you want to purchase one of these, and again, I'm giving one away, but if you want to purchase one, start out really slow. And when I say really slow, I mean 1 over even 800. I mean, start out really slow, at least the first couple hours until you start to test. And I would test it every hour or every 2 hours, because if this thing is dropping a ton of alkalinity, you'll know right away. You'll know in an hour that you're too high. Because it unfortunately, in my opinion, it just spits out way too high alkalinity, especially for people that don't have high consumption. So if you have a tank that doesn't have a lot of high consumption, this unit is not a good fit for you. I'm going to tell you right now. This is going to be too big, and it's going to give out too much alkalinity. Okay? A lot of people are asking about what size tank is it rated for. I'm going to continue to say the same thing. Consumption. Nothing to do with size of the tank. You can have 1,000-gallon tank, and if you have all softies in it, this might not be the right fit for you. It's just not gonna. It's gonna maintain too high of an alkalinity that your tank doesn't need it. John has a predominantly SPS tank, so he's needing something like this. And the way you really know is you start off, like we said earlier in the stream, you start off, hey, dosing. If you find that dosing is too expensive and too cumbersome, then you move on to calcium reactors. Then another question someone had was, how do you pick the right calcium reactor? Well, again, this is an ACR. It's going to cost you triple the price of a standard calcium reactor setup. But there's no regulator adjustment. There's no pH probe. There's no pH controller. There's no pump. There's no continuous duty pump. You don't need any of that stuff. So that's the biggest difference between the two.
And then also the other thing with this too is if you do end up having it, and, again, the bubbles are normal for it to come up because that's the CO2 recirculating in there.
Right.
It does get a little noisy if you do not have it inside of a cabinet.
Well, Devin, I don't know if you're still on, but that's a no-no for Devin. Anything that's loud, that's a no-no.
You can always turn off or adjust the recirculation for CO2 by just putting a quick little valve in there, but that's really the only way you can control that noise.
Okay. Yeah, mine wasn't too loud. I don't know, maybe because mine didn't work, but mine wasn't very loud. Let's see. Apex Ready Drama DS. So the only Apex Ready is the plug for the valve box. So the valve box, if you kill power to it, it basically stops working. So that's really the only Apex Ready part. And when we say Apex Ready, what I'm saying is monitoring if the alkalinity gets too high. You want to shut this off.
I have mine set up. If my feed pump, it turns off, it automatically shuts off that valve box. That way, it doesn't try to keep introducing CO2 into the system, and as well as it kind of shuts off that flow.
Right.
So
exactly, which is important. Murtaza had a really good question, so I want you to also chime in kind of what your opinion is of this. I found that the ACR burns through media way faster than any standard calcium reactor. Do you find that the same?
I'm not seeing that.
Okay.
I'm using Carib C coarse arm, and I have not seen a burn through and anything at all. They do recommend using two little fishies,
which
reborn,
is impossible to find.
Which is impossible to find from what I'm hearing from a lot of people out there is that he is looking for another source to start bringing it back in. Yeah. Because apparently there was a permit, it was a CITES issue that they're running through.
Wonderful.
Yeah. It all dealt with the whole Indo thing.
Right. Yeah. So for me, and again, I keep saying this and I apologize, but my calcium reactor wasn't really working properly per se, and it was burning through the media real fast. You got to remember that this thing has a much higher alkalinity than you controlling the alkalinity. With a standard calcium reactor, you control the effluent, you control the pH inside. So if you don't want it to burn as fast, you raise the pH in the calcium reactor and it won't burn as fast. So to answer the gentleman's question, how often do you to top off is a big variable. It depends on how you're running your calcium reactor. Now, of course, the ACR, I believe anyone that has an ACR is running essentially the same effluent out, and it depends on the media, I believe.
Yeah, it's been like I pay attention to his forum quite often, and people are coming up with different numbers everywhere. Someone even said they got effluent of 100, and I find
Doubt
that really
it.
hard to believe.
Doubt
But
it.
I say like the max saturation is somewhere around 50. So
Okay.
because it does burn up a max saturation of CO2.
Right. Exactly. Anthony had a question. How do you test effluent? Well, that's easy. You just typically you'll dilute it because
Yep.
most systems, most tests can't test 40 DKH. So you'll dilute it. 50% generally is okay. Some
I
tests
do
won't do 20.
I do 25% dilution
Okay.
to find
And then you
the
just divide it, Anthony. So if you have a dilution of fourth, like John, you'll take a fourth of the effluent of the ACR, and then you'll take 3/4 RODI, you'll put it in there, and then you'll just divide or you'll multiply, you'll multiply the number by 4 in that case. Okay. Um, all right, so let's, now that we got, anybody else have any questions about the ACR, how it works? Because that is what we are giving away today. Obviously, I don't have directions, but John's on our group, and if you have any questions when you receive it, I am done with this thing. So John will be John will now be the tech support because I'm done with it. So,
Listen, I'll be more than happy to help anybody out who wins this thing. So
so there you go,
because I'm not
guys.
allowed to,
John will,
so one of you, I have to help one of
yeah,
you out. So
yeah, John will help you because the owner of the company hates me. So, John's your go-to. Anyway, we're going to go over regular calcium reactors now, okay? And that's kind of the whole point of this stream today. So I'm going to switch over to my Apex. So give me one moment and I'll switch over to it. And we're going to go over kind of regular calcium reactors, okay? So one thing to know about regular calcium reactors and the biggest difference between the ACR and a regular calcium reactor is you have to monitor two things with a normal calcium reactor. You have to monitor the effluent flow, and you have to monitor the pH that's going into the chamber, or the pH of the chamber, sorry. So when you have a calcium reactor, you need some sort of controller for pH, and that can be either an Apex, or you can buy just a standalone controller. With the ACR, the big difference is you don't need any of that stuff, and you just kill the ACR power if your alkalinity gets too high. And that's basically how you would program it. So my suggestion for most people with calcium reactors has always been that you should program it day and night mode. And I actually have a video on how to do that. So what I mean by day and night mode is when you use a calcium reactor, it's going to, for the best way to explain it is it's going to put a lot of high alkalinity, low pH during the nighttime, which can technically, in most cases, drop your pH significantly. So what I ended up doing is there's so many ways to do this, but what I ended up doing is just changing the pH that was inside my calcium reactor during the night. So at night, I'd have the pH higher in the calcium reactor, and then during the day, I'd have the pH lower, and that's how I did it. Um, what do you think, John?
um, see, with when I had my ProCal, I just left the rate just kind of stay steady as possible because it's kind of hard to get that adjustment right. So I try, once you have it locked in, I try to keep it locked in.
Yeah. So what
So
was happening with my
that's the whole
tank?
point of a calcium reactor too. So
Right. So what was happening with my tank, and a lot of people don't know this because they don't have a Trident or they don't have an automatic alkalinity tester, is I started to notice that my alkalinity was spiking significantly during the night. And when I say significantly, I mean 1 DKH of a spike. It wasn't minor by any means. So for me, I definitely found that having a less of a spike at night was more important for me, and that's kind of how I did this. So we're gonna kind of go over how to do that. Let me see. Whoops, I just pushed the wrong button. Of course, I'm always pushing wrong buttons. So
That's
I
what Bill
think,
said too. Right.
yeah. He wants to get me going, and that's not gonna happen. Where's Desert Reef Aquatics, by the way? I told him to get on this morning so everyone
It's
can make
by
fun of him.
3D printing coral and fish. So
Yeah, he didn't come on, and no one can make fun of him now. So what's the deal? Like everyone doesn't know that during the streams, whoever has the best joke gets entered twice into the
like
contest,
I guess he left on his high note of giving you $100 for the towards the contest.
and then never coming back. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, yes.
That's what he does. Anyway, uh, so I thought you lowered the pH to make the alkalinity available system via the effluent water. I'm not sure how to answer that question. I thought you lowered the pH to dissolve media to make it not necessarily available, you make it higher. You make the alkalinity and calcium higher by lowering the pH. I don't know what he meant by available. So, oh well. He forgot to print his new fingers, so he can't sign on. Everyone loves the 3D printing because when he started talking about the 3D printing in the stream, I was like, we got to turn the stream off because all he's talking about is 3D printing. Nothing to do with what we're talking about.
You know, Anthony brings up a good point. I guess he's printing his own calcium reactor now too. So
Yes, he
it's a
must
possibility.
be. Yes, he
He's
must
getting
be.
the ideas.
Yeah. Okay, so even though I think John feels the same way I do, programming, really getting into programming of a calcium reactor is kind of like a niche, I would say, or niche type of thing. You don't really need to generally. You generally just turn it on and let it just go 24/7, right? But then we
Yeah, I
get,
set mine up as redundancy just in case something were to happen while
yeah.
I'm not here.
But then of course we get the programming people like me who want to tinker and do crazy things. So
Yeah.
we're gonna go over the crazy things, even though you generally don't have to do this. So, oh, he's back. Look at this. Look at this. Desert. He just magically came on, guys. This guy decided to just come on at what? 55 minutes in, Desert Reef. Good job, buddy. Good job. Such an
Did he ask a
asset.
question though?
Such an asset to our stream, Desert Reef Aquatics. No, he doesn't ask anything. He doesn't do anything. He is the most worthless mod on our stream.
I'm
Okay.
not a beat mod because I'm a Flyers fan. So sorry.
Oh, well, it doesn't matter. He doesn't like hockey, from my understanding. So, anyway. Okay. So, I think people came in to learn how to program calcium reactors. So,
That's true.
so unfortunately, we got to do this. So, you're going to need a pH probe. That's what you're going to need. You're going to need to calibrate your pH probe at the lower mount. So, when you get a calcium reactor, you buy, instead of buying the 7 and 10 packets, you buy the 4 and 7 packets. Because your pH is going to be roughly 6.5 to 7 generally is what they're run at. I know people run it lower, but that's just a general statement. And you'll know what to run yours at when you start to use it. And then
The
you're
problem
going to need...
when we run too low, the media ends up becoming mush.
Right, exactly.
So, and you end up having more issues.
John, do you leave the recirculating on when you feed pump shuts off? I think
Yes.
you should run the recirc all the time. There's no reason to shut that off. It's not going to cause any problems.
No, I leave mine on. It's unless I know I'm gonna leave the reactor off for an extended period of time. That's the only time I really do turn it off.
Yeah. By the way, people, we have 43 people that have entered the contest. We need 7 more people to give this away. So I just want to let you know. I'm not giving it away unless 50 people have entered. It's a lot of money. And I sadly had people ask to buy it this week. Anyway, okay, so once you have your probe, you're going to calibrate it. So, if you have a regular Apex or you have a PM1, you can program that pH just to do your calcium reactor. So you'll go in here and then you'll calibrate it, and when you calibrate it, you're going to calibrate it, like I said, with 4 and 7. Once it's calibrated, you pop that sucker into the calcium reactor, and then you're going to program your solenoid for your regulator to turn off and on depending on the pH that's within the calcium reactor. Okay? The carbon doser is a fantastic regulator because it's an electronic regulator. And what's so good about that is its ability to turn off and cycle as much as you want without having to worry about the solenoid breaking. I had a carbon doser for 3 years. I know Devin from Reef Dudes has my carbon doser. I'm sure he says it's working perfectly fine. They have extremely limited issues. If you're doing a normal calcium reactor, that's the regulator I would highly recommend. The other regulators are fine, but they're prone to solenoid issues. So, just be aware. You're spending money, $350 on a regulator, which is expensive. Don't get me wrong, but you're not going to have any issues with it. I mean,
Because I know when I had mine, I had like your basic bubble counting regulator on it.
Yep.
And I probably went through 3 of them.
There you go.
And I probably should have gone with the carbon doser in the first place because I hear a lot less issues with them.
Yeah, the carbon doser, you won't have any problems. I can assure you won't have any problems. So again, plan on spending money on a calcium reactor. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Don't think that you're going to go and spend $200 on an entire setup, because you're not. Spend money on your calcium reactor. You want it to last a long time. You don't want to have problems with it. The biggest issue and the biggest crashes people have are with calcium reactors failing, because the problem with calcium reactors as a whole is you really have zero control if it's going to dump alkalinity. I mean, you really don't have control over it unless you have a lot of alarms and pH and things to check. Whereas dosing, hey, my doser just decided to go off and my alkalinity skyrocketed. I'm just going to turn off my doser. So buy a good solenoid, buy a good feed pump. Do it right, because trust me, it's worth it. And you're going to have a lot less stability issues also. That's another thing.
Devin brought up a great question. Pushing water up through or down. Typically, I would say most calcium reactors are going to push up, and this way it's going to circulate. So that's usually how they all work for the most part. And then when my ProCal pushed down, I actually modified it to push up because I didn't like how it was giving me the performance before.
Right, exactly. So. Brandon had a really good question. Could you just not program a disable timer? Yeah, you could program anything you want, Brandon. Everything we're talking about is for people that just want a basic setup right now. How do you get a calcium reactor going? We're going to go into the crazy programming here in a second. It wouldn't be an automation stream without me going crazy. So I'm going to show you that. So you can program a disable timer. So you can program a when statement, or you can program anything where, hey, if the calcium reactor alkalinity has been high for this amount of time, shut off something. And again, you would need a Trident, or you need an Alkatronic, or you need something that monitors alkalinity to know if your alkalinity is rising. Now, of course, if your pH is going down really fast, that's another generalization that your calcium reactor is on the fritz. If your pH starts dropping, that generally means something's wrong with your calcium reactor. It's dumping too much, essentially.
Some people, do feed. If you do have a pH issue inside your tank, they do feed it into the into your skimmer to kind of off gas a little easier. The only problem with that is that you will end up calcifying your pump. But
right. Yeah. Yeah. So this is what I used to do, and again, by no means is this the right way to do it, but this is what I used to do because I was crazy. So I had 2 virtual outlets. I had an outlet specifically for day and night, and then I had my solenoid talk to it. So I'm kind of going to just show you how to do that. So people that haven't really gotten to virtual outlets, I can tell you that once you get into them, you're never going to stop, because they make your life so much easier. So let's say I have a daytime. We're going to call it CO2 or calcium reactor. Oh, look at that. I already had it there. Day and a night. And that's how I used to do it. And what I was able to do, the reason I was able to do that is the ability to um, provide less of a spike. I was having a high spike during the night. So this allowed me to have my calcium reactor kind of rock solid. Um, so Garrett had a great question. What time are you streaming till? I never tell people that. So I'm not going to tell you, Garrett, what time I'm streaming to till today, because those are the tricksters who like to come in late and win the contest.
That's why they call you D-Rock.
D-Rock, yeah. I had fun with that. Um, it was all because of Devin. All right, let's
Yeah.
see. Where am I going? Okay. So these are two virtual outlets, day and night, okay? And I don't have a solenoid anymore, so I'm going to pretend that something else is a solenoid. So again, your solenoid would be the device that's on the CO2 tank that turns on and off the CO2, okay? So what I used to do is I used to go into my calcium reactor night, and I would say if my calcium reactor pH or I'm sorry, if my time was between, what is going on here? Let's say, I'm going to say 7 p.m., maybe, yeah, let's do 7 p.m. So if 7 p.m., and this is my night one, 7 p.m. to, let's say, 10 a.m., then on. So that was my night solenoid right here. Or my night virtual outlet, right? So we have a night virtual outlet, and then we have a day virtual outlet. Okay? And let's go here. Sorry, John, this will probably be boring for you. And
No, that's all right.
then we'd have if time 10 a.m. to, what did I say? I said 9. Did I say 7, 8? That's right, I said 7. So I'd have my day and night virtual outlets, okay? So what this would basically do is it would let you enable the solenoid at a different amount during a different time of the day. So during the night, this would be on, and during the day, this would be on. You see that? So on and off. Okay, so during the day, so what I would do is I would then make, I'm trying to think what I could use here. I'll just use my reef maintenance mode, which is not a good idea. So I would say if outlet, what do we call this? Calcium reactor day equals on, then on, right? And if outlet calcium reactor night is on, then on. And this again would be the solenoid. So this would enable the solenoid during the day and the night. Okay. Now let's say we wanted it to only be on at specific pHs during those two times. Okay. So I have my day and my night, right? Let's pretend this virtual outlet is my solenoid. Okay. So day and night, when those are on, turn on my solenoid. Okay. And now I'm going to go back. I apologize if I'm not getting to you guys' questions. I just want to go through this. So in here, what I would do is I put my pH in. Okay, so if pH is less than, and this is how I used to do it, if my CO2 pH is greater than, I don't know, 6.9, let's say, then off, or on, sorry. So what this would mean is at night, I want my pH to be inside the reactor 6.9, okay? Then I would have it on. Now I can also then add another one if CO2 pH is less than 6. Let's say 8, then off. So what's going to happen here is this time right here is never going to happen because this is going to turn it off, okay? So again, I did a whole video on this, by the way, but I'm just kind of going through it quickly. So this is my nighttime pH inside my calcium reactor, okay? So again, it's only going to be on during these times, and it's going to turn off if the pH is between these two values. So now I would go back to my daytime, and I would change my CO2 values, okay? So I go to my daytime, and let's say during the day I needed a higher alkalinity, I would change my CO2 to a little bit lower, maybe 6.6 to 6.5. So during the daytime, the internal calcium reactor pH is going to be lower, and during the nighttime, it's going to be higher. Okay? So that's how you change essentially your effluent amount or your alkalinity amount during those periods of time. And then, of course, you don't change the effluent flow, you keep the flow the same. And it's adjusting it based on the pH. Now, since I had my calcium reactor, they've had many advancements in effluent devices or continuous pumps, such as the Versa and such as the Camor Wi-Fi. So now you can keep the pH the same, but change the effluent during certain times of the day, which will essentially do the exact same thing. So you could have your Versa between 7 p.m. and 10 a.m. at a lower amount of, milliliters per minute, and then during the daytime a higher. And that would essentially do exactly what I just did. So those are the two ways kind of to do it. Okay? Any questions? I know I went through it kind of quick. John, do you have any questions? I'm sure this doesn't matter to you.
No.
So again, when you have an ACR, all of this stuff that we're talking about right now really has nothing to do with anything we're talking about because the ACR does everything for you. Okay?
I'm seeing a lot of questions about using magnesium additive inside or remag inside of the reactors. Okay. I don't use any type of remag inside mine at all. Mainly because I hate to say it, but the ARM typically does have a good magnesium output. So I really don't need to add any extra magnesium in there. And if I do, I just manually dose that when I do need to add it. So, but everything else kind of stays very stabilized.
Yeah, so I did run magnesium with my ACR. I also was using Reborn, so I don't know if that's any different than I'm assuming it is, but I did have to run magnesium media to keep it up. John, is your ACR double stacked or single? Someone was asking.
Mine is a single.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an 8-inch single. It was kind of a last minute change. I originally ordered the 6 and then requested the 8.
I see. Drama D had a question. So the virtual outlet is the PM1. No, the virtual outlet is the solenoid that you're turning off and on. The PM1 is what monitors your pH. So let's see. TG. People are talking to Devin too much. What's the warranty on the ACR? Oh boy.
All right.
Okay.
So
you can talk about the warranty on the ACR, and then I'm going to talk.
Okay. They do say it is a lifetime warranty against his defects. So I'll tell you, this thing is built like a tank to begin with, and I really haven't any issues with it other than the valve module kind of going a little funky. But he was very quick to resolve that issue. But the big thing is really just make sure you get in contact with him and tell him the difference, what steps you went through to try to resolve the issue first. You'll have a better experience with him overall.
What is the warranty on the electronic parts? Someone asked. Same thing, right?
Great question. I have no idea. I'm assuming it's a lifetime, but yes.
Okay. All right, so we went over kind of the programming. We're at about an hour and 15 minutes, so we're gonna close up shop pretty soon. We only have 47 people entered in the contest, so I'm not gonna give it away unless we have 50 people entered, unfortunately. I just can't give away a $1,700 piece of equipment without rules. So, and again, I did have some people that were interested in buying it, but I know people out there are interested in getting it. So, all right, so let's go over a couple things. Friends get friends in here. So John's unit, and John, if I say anything that is incorrect, just slap me electronically.
I'll be in Arizona soon. It's all right.
So John had a similar issue that I had. Okay. Unfortunately, when I got my unit, which took roughly 2.5 months, mine came and it was an 8-inch unit, and I ordered a 6. So I was like, okay, I have no use for this. And the company owner said, hey, um, can you use the 8? And I said, no. He's like, okay, well, I'll get you out of 6. And then that took forever to get. And then I finally got the 6, plugged it in, no power, didn't work. So John had a really good point, and I wanted to kind of mention this a little bit. For some reason, I'm trying not to be. I'm trying to be positive, by the way. Um, when I started to have issues with my unit, I couldn't get hold of the owner for the life of me. I tried calling, I tried texting, I tried everything. However, I did get somewhat service if I messaged or I put a thread on the Facebook group. If I put stuff on the Facebook group, I noticed that the owner and people would be willing to help me at that point. But getting a hold of the company was almost impossible. And John mentioned something that's really important to know. If you try to fix it on your own, he seems to be more adept at helping you. The problem with that is, in my case, I tried to fix it and then I got unfortunately blamed for breaking it. So it's a double-edged sword there. I mean, if you want to try to fix it on your own, he's going to be more helpful. But then if you try to fix it on your own and break it, he's going to be extremely less helpful. So what's your thoughts?
Um, so my experience was that I just noticed I had an issue, and then I opened up the valve body and kind of I went well first I tested I pulled the CO2 off of the reactor and tested to make sure there was CO2 coming out of it, and there it wasn't. So then I moved, obviously you move to the valve body. Then I went through that whole testing and everything else through the valve body. And when I did call him, I told him the steps I went through and how to identify the issue, and he say, all right, cool, I'm gonna send you a new unit out. But he also was willing to go through and make sure and see if I missed any type of steps of resolving, which I didn't. And he was very quick, to remedy the issue. So again, my experiences have been different than Derek's, but and from what I've been hearing is it could have been triggered based upon the feedback he received inside of the ACR group that customer service was tending to be of an issue. So I believe he has stepped up his game in that respect.
And I appreciate you saying that because I was just about to say the same thing. Whether or not anyone out there that's listening to this realizes this or not, is I started my group and I started my YouTube to help people. That's my main goal, is to help people. I don't get sponsored by anyone. None of the stuff that I give away is given to me. I purchase it on my own dime and I decide to give it away. To that same token, with this whole situation, by me providing a review on my experience, appears to have lit a fire in the owner, and therefore he's seemingly helping people now, which in my opinion is fantastic news, and I applaud him for that, because that was the whole point of the review, is to get people to up their game or change. If they find flaws in what they're doing, I believe they should fix them. It's the same thing when I said, would I have problems with ReefBot? They haven't fixed their problems, and all I want them to do is fix their problems. And that's the whole point of reviews. And then you know what I'll do? I'll do a second review, and I'll say, hey, my ReefBot works fantastic now. Thank you, Reef Kinetics, for making all those changes based on my initial review. So, like John, there's also been a number of other people that have told me that the owner of the company has really changed his ways. And that's really good news. I really like hearing that,
The one thing I'll tell you, especially with this group, is, and I can't speak for ReefBot or anything like that, but there is a community for the ACR. It's kind of like a private community in Facebook. And there's a lot of smart guys in there that would be more than willing to help you out and try to resolve your issues. Mm-hmm. And it's, kind of help you troubleshoot what you're experiencing. So that is very helpful. The only thing I can say, that I have not been, as happy with the ACR is he does constantly change the design. Obviously, it is getting better, but it's not released in versions. It's just kind of as how is released in sporadic times. So that's kind of like the hard thing. It's kind of hard to discern what version people do have.
And you had a really good point right there. All of the issues that I had, by the way, guys, he fixed them. He fixed all of them. But unfortunately, in my case, and John knows the story, he blamed me for breaking his unit. When at the end, we found out that all of the issues I had, he fixed. So it's kind of disconcerting, unfortunately, and I'm kind of done with it, But the point I'm making is that's great that he's fixing them, but the people that are suffering or having issues with their systems, he should be sending them these parts at no charge if you have a lifetime warranty. That's kind of how I look at it.
See, I see it from a different side, and we've discussed this before. Obviously everybody's systems are different. There's always going to be some type of accessory to enhance the usability of that product.
Accessory, yes.
Right.
Fix,
now,
no.
Like with me, I would never need that purge valve or even like the automatic the actual solenoid to shut off the feed. Those items I don't need. I don't have the back feed issue. I don't have any of that. Mm-hmm. So my tank, I would never even use any of those accessories that you're mentioning. But he didn't charge me to send the parts out to me. Obviously right. I did send the original the broken pieces back to him, and and that was it. So that way he can analyze and see what actually did happen to that unit. But yeah. That's it. But a lot of people do have issues with them, because of the fact of the regulators, since there is no built-in solenoid on them. That they crank open that CO2 bottle, and then all of a sudden it just blows the reactor to smithereens.
Right.
It does happen.
Mm-hmm. So to that point, you make a really good point. And I'm again, this is my story. So again, other people might have had different experiences. When I first bought my ACR, I actually asked Bill a couple times. I said, hey, what regulator do I need? Any regulator. You can use any regulator. Okay. I'll use my little cheapo regulator. Okay. So I was like, all right. So then I called him after I bought the regulator, and I said, what do I turn the bubble count to? Now again, you got to remember at the time, I didn't know anything about the ACR. I didn't know how it works. I had never seen it before. I just knew bubble count, like everyone else that's had calcium reactors, bubble count. He said, you don't have to worry about your bubble count, just leave it wide open. I go, okay. So that's how my valves broke, obviously.
Yeah. The one thing I would say is, especially with it, is, again, 6 to 8 pounds of pressure is all you need. You don't need much more than that.
And then, of course, I said to him, okay, well, what after it broke and all this other problems I had, what do I need? Oh, well, I'll send you a regulator that will work. I was like, oh, great. I don't have to get a regulator, right? And then I never got it. So then I had to go get that beer one that you have. And then that's when he stopped talking to me. So, my experience obviously is kind of on the, maybe on the more extreme, I would say. Since I'm on YouTube and since I've grown a group, I have more of a voice, let's say. So I've told my story to many people, and I've put it on YouTube, and I've discussed it. And yeah, it's an extreme story, but that is my story, and that is my opinion. So for those that have entered, I want to mention this again. My unit works perfectly fine now, okay? I made the decision to take it out because not only was it too big for my system, but for those that don't know, the owner just decided he didn't want to help me anymore. So my lifetime warranty basically went down the tubes. So I said, I'm not going to use this unit anymore because I don't have a warranty anymore, and it's too big for my system. So that's why I got rid of it. So for people that are worried that they're going to be getting a broken unit or an issue, I can assure you my unit has been fixed with a new controller and all that jazz. So I just want to mention that.
Yeah, and one somebody just brought up, so he says some of the new ACRs have a check valve that requires 10 pounds. Again, yeah, you're gonna have to test it. Just make sure there's bubbles coming out, at the reactor end. So once you do get that, you do see bubbles, like you just do like a small container, just kind of see if you do have bubbles pushing past that check valve, and they should be all right. As long as you have bubbles, like a small amount of bubbles coming out, you're good to go.
Yes, and again, my warranty is now transferred to John. So for everyone that has problems, annoy John because I'm not helping you. I'm not
I just want to supply parts.
Oh, well, I see Eric's on here. Eric, who asked about the ACR with the check valve. I think he owned an ACR as well. So I don't know. I'm not going to go into it too much. For those that actually saw the review, you guys know the whole story and know what happened. Um, I hope he's getting better, and I hope he's being more responsive to his clients because the unit costs a lot of money, and I expect a certain level of service for the amount of money. I mean, they cost $1,500, guys. So, the smaller ones are a little cheaper, but an average of $1,500 is a lot of money for a lot of people, and I expect some pretty darn good customer service if you're spending that kind of money.
I will
And
say this
John,
thing's built like a tank, though.
that's true. And for those that
It's built out of PVC, it's straight PVC, and it doesn't use cheap, PVC or anything like that. It's got some quality to it.
Mhm.
So I will give it that.
And John made a really good point. And for the owner, if he ever watches this video, I'm looking at you right now. Your unit is fantastic. Okay, the unit is great. John made a perfect point. It is bulletproof. I have a feeling if you took this outside and shot it with a gun, you would kill yourself because it would bounce the bullet and shoot yourself. It is extremely well built. It's the customer service that I had issues with, and I believe he's becoming better and better with his customer service. So, congrats to the owner. Just keep it up with being a good owner of a company, and that's all I ever asked from you.
Listen,
Okay?
Bill. If anybody understands the background of where he came from, he is actually it was a pharmaceutical engineer. So he's a brilliant, smart guy. So he does put a lot of attention into his builds and the detail into them as well.
Yes, extreme detail. I would highly, I would again really agree with you on everything you said. There's not one
Yeah,
thing I've disagreed with John on this whole situation. Um,
yeah. The only thing, like when you
unfortunately,
deal with extremely smart people, is sometimes they don't have the social skills, and that's it's kind of apparent. But
yeah. But again, John had a good experience with him, and that's great. I like to see people having good experiences with the product. That's all that's important. And if my review helped him get to that point, then that's great. It really is great to me. I sincerely say to everyone, it's great to know that he's getting better. Um, People are talking about my yellow Tang. Yeah, so my yellow Tang was beat up when I bought him a long time ago, and he's got a cool mohawk. So I don't know what you guys are complaining about. He's doing just fine. Just hasn't grown fully in yet. That's all. Um, so I'm not going to go on about this, but if anyone really wants to know all the fun that happened, I love talking about it. But I'm not going to talk about it live, and I'm just happy John got taken care of, and that's all that matters. And his unit works great, and hopefully the unit I give you works great, and if it doesn't, John is here to help. So not a big deal. Okay, so we're going to do the contest. We do got 54 people in. Um, for those that are late to the party, we're going to go over a couple things real quick again. Um, Whoever wins has to pay shipping. It's a large box. It's going to come with a CO2 tank, empty, so you're going to have to get it filled. I'm not sending a full CO2 tank through the mail. And a regulator. The regulator is the same one John has. It's a beer dispensing regulator. It is the correct one that you use with the ACR. The recommendation is to set it between 5 and 10 psi. You're going to find out what works for you. I'm not. Once you get it, if it's broken, I will refund your shipping, and you can take it and put it wherever the hell you want. I don't care.
Hey, you know what? PR Fish Girl's been over my house before, so she's seen it.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to say this again in the stream. It is a free $1,700 value device. It comes with a CO2 tank and a regulator that cost me $180. The device itself was $1,500. It's a dual ACR 6-inch unit. Okay? If it doesn't work when you get it, John is here to help, and I am washing my hands of it. That's the reason I'm giving it away. Okay? I've had people literally text me and say they're going to give me $800 for it, and I have said no, I'm giving it away this weekend. So that's what I'm doing. I'll get insurance on the shipping, so hopefully, it won't be a big deal. But anyway, you're going to get it. It's going to be fine.
This thing is heavy, by the way.
Oh, yeah, it's heavy.
It is heavy.
So for the winner, I'm going to just throw it out there. You're probably going to be paying me $75 to about $150 to ship it. I'm just letting you know right now. You will have to get RO tubing. I recommend different colors so you know what it is. I don't have any RO tubing with me, and it's been packed in a box for a month now. So again, it's free. Right, guys? It's free, with the exception of the shipping. So once you get it, if you have problems or it's broken, it's free. Okay? I'm just saying that right now. All right, we'll go. I know. I like talking. All right. So here we go, guys. For everyone that entered, I think I have a couple mods on the channel. As I mentioned earlier, whoever wins this has to have participated in the stream. Otherwise, I'm not giving it away. Okay? And here we go. Let's see what we got. This is a big one, guys. This is a big one. This is the most expensive thing I've given away.
It's more expensive than a Trident, so.
But it's double the price of a Trident.
Yeah.
The winner today is Robert Smith. I don't even know who you are, sir. So, Robert Smith, are you on the channel? I haven't seen you talk at all. Am I mistaken in this assumption? I think we're going to re-roll this guy. I don't believe I saw this person say anything.
Oh, there he is. He said yay.
He did? I don't see him.
He just said yay. That's it. But.
Oh, he is here. Here he is. Maybe I have just a. You must have not as much of a delay as I do.
I'm not much better.
Okay. Okay, so.
I just looked through all the chat and I didn't see him mention anything. So
again, Robert Smith, I don't know who you are, sir, and I'm trying to be as. This is a very expensive thing that I'm giving away, so I only want to give this away to someone who participated in the stream today. So my mods, there are a number of them on here, and I want you to inform me if I should give this away to Robert. So it's going to be their fault, not my fault. People are like, redraw, of course, redraw. He said he asked a question about an LSM. I don't remember seeing it, but that's just me. I've been so busy. Yeah, he asked a question, so.
There you go.
We're going to give it away to Robert Smith, it looks like. So, All right, so Brian says we're going to give us away, so we're going to give it away. All right, Robert, you are the winner, sir. I need you to PM me on Facebook and tell me where we're shipping this to, and I'll give you a quote to ship it. And congratulations, buddy. John is going to be your new best friend, so get to know John. His last name is Tolbert. He's on our stream. He's on our group. So, John, prepare for some questions. I'm not helping.
I'll make sure I make them truly expensive.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, guys. John charges $300 an hour like a lawyer, so I forgot to mention that part. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so John, thank you so much for being on today. Thank you so much for a lot of the boring parts, for staying put.
No, that's fine.
You really helped us. You really helped us show the ACR off. I really, really appreciate you being on today. And furthermore, those that don't know, once we hit 1,000 subs on our YouTube channel, we're going to be giving away a Trident. I actually physically have it. It is in my storage. I took a picture of it. It hasn't been opened. It hasn't been touched. And it's going to include these little needle guide valves with it as well. So, yeah. I look forward to us getting 1,000 subs, guys. And again, John, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I hope you guys like the new setup, the new screen, the new fun stuff. It's going to get more fun, more cool. I got some cool stuff coming, so
Hey, you know
I
what?
think we got to 600
It's
today.
from what I normally do for a living, so I'm happy.
Good, good. But yes, again, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough. I appreciate everybody that comes on the streams. You really helped us out today, specifically explaining the ACR. So, yeah, thank you, everybody, and stay safe, and I hope you enjoyed the stream today. See you all later.